Another regular on television, on the Daily Politics. He was recently on Question Time. He's also on Any Questions on a regular basis, on the radio as well. He's really made the immigration policy his own and become a master of his subject, particularly the European Union's freedom of movement of people. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Chester's own Stephen Woolfe. Thank you very much.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, Paul. Paul hides himself under a bushel. You see the way that he has held himself today, and as the single North West MEP who fought the battle up here to build this constituency up to the way that it is today, I am proud to be a member of the MEPs to the North West and proud to have our Deputy Leader introduce me today. Thank you very much, Paul. But I'm also proud to work alongside someone like Louise. Louise, who came in here and has taken hold of the NHS brief for UKIP, but also done more than that. She has shown not only how we as a party could ensure that the NHS is safe in our hands, not as it is unsafe in other political parties' hands, but she has taken hold of what the European Union, and particularly TTIP, is going to do to damage the health of our most precious service, the health that looks after our children, the health that looks after you, the health that looks after our parents and grandparents. Thank you very much, Louise, for that. That is immeasurable work that you are doing. But of course, I wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be here. And the referendum wouldn't be on us soon for us to get hold of our country and get our country back if it wasn't for one man who this evening has set out the case, not only for an Australian points-based border system that would ensure that we can look after our own, that the way that we spend our own money would be able to look after the education and health of our own people, to ensure that we be able to invest in the housing and services need to make sure that our country is great again. Without that one man leading the charge so that we can leave the European Union, without Nigel Farage, we wouldn't be here. And I thank you, Nigel, for allowing me in your team. And Nigel, your message of hope and inspiration in terms of the democratic rights that we have fits very well here in Chester, actually. Because Chester, to those of you know, once had a very strong Chester jail. In 1841, a number of people who believed in something as fundamental as the opportunity for men and women to have the vote, for men and women to be able to look after their own lives, the men and women to have the franchise, otherwise known as the Chartists. Those Chartists who were radicals came here and were imprisoned. Nigel, 73 of them were imprisoned in 1841 by our government, who wanted to stamp out the radicalism of having the franchise. Well, thankfully that jail is closed. Otherwise, I think tonight outside there'll be 630 more in this room outside there. But also, if we look down of our busy M6, and I know if any of you tried to get down there, a little down there and a little further on, down the M42, is a little village called Burford. Now, I don't know if any of you have been there, but Burford, to me, is an essential element of our democratic history. For outside a church in Burford, there is a commemoration, a little plaque, that celebrates history that I don't think is taught in our schools anymore. A plaque that commemorates the deaths of 3 men. Let me read the names of those 3 men. Cornet James Thompson, Corporal Perkins, and John Church. Now, these were 3 soldiers who fought in the New Model Army, an army that was radicalized and brought together again to get rid of an inhumane king who was pressurizing his own people under the leadership of Cromwell. Now, Cromwell brought them all together and they defeated that king. But as you remember very clearly from Cromwell, once he got into power, he seemed to like it an awful lot. And he didn't like these radicals, who these three men were part of, an organization called the Levellers, who also believed in the same freedoms that Nigel has fought for: democratic accountability of our leadership, the franchise and the vote. So he chased them down and their gang of merry men to this church. And in that church he stood outside and demanded that they come out one by one and recant their radical views of democracy, of liberty and of freedom. One by one, those men that were alongside those three men came out, except those three men didn't. They decided to stand strong because they believed in freedom. They stood strong because they believed it was inherent that their children should be free. They stood strong because they wanted to see their families and friends free. And for that, they were murdered on the spot by Cromwell. Freedom, liberty, justice. They roll off the tongue so easily, don't they? So much so that many people forget the importance of what they actually mean and what it actually is. As Ronald Reagan, the ex-president of the United States, once said, freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. If we didn't pass it on to our children in our bloodstream, it must be fought for, protected, and handed on to those in the future so that they can have what we have. And in this year, we also celebrate two other important points of our historical fight for freedom. Magna Carta. Well, once again, the people pushed a king to grant us a little bit more freedom. But we also celebrate the Battle of Britain. There, young men, just like some of the young men that I see in this room, who are more than 19 or 20 or 21, decided that they would get up in the planes and fly above us, knowing that they could die, simply because they wanted to protect the freedoms of this country. As Churchill said to them at that moment, the battle of France is over, the battle of Britain has begun. Upon this battle depends the survival of our Christian civilization. Upon it depends our British life and our institutions. How many of us now would actually do the same and stand up to fight for the democratic rights of this nation? How many of us will stand up to represent those in our past who have done it and fought for us? How many of you in this room will join Nigel and Louise and Paul and myself to ensure that we win this referendum and get those freedoms back that this country once had? I joined UKIP because I believe in freedom. I joined UKIP giving up a good job because I believed in our historical context. I joined UKIP because there were those who stood up because they believed every man and woman deserved to be free. Stood up because they believed it didn't matter what your race or creed or religion or sexuality was. It matters that you are free. Stood up because they believed that this country has offered us the opportunities to be free more than any other country in the world. And that is why it's so important. And in standing up, they'd established the principles that we hold true. Habeas corpus, parliamentary democracy, the right to know your accuser. This great nation of Wellington, Nelson, Elizabeth I, of Churchill, or people like my grandfather, who without hesitation and without question fought in the sands of Africa to ensure that the European dictators that were striving across Europe at that time did not come to this country. And it's times like this when we in this room must come together and remember that there is a cause that unites us all. Far too often those freedoms have been taken away. You are the beacon carriers of our freedom. We are responsible to our generations to come to ensure that this country can offer the freedoms that allow us to be in this room today. And whether we enjoy those freedoms or not, is whether you can persuade those of your neighbours and your friends. This isn't a time for the politics of the left or the right, for the old or the young. This is a time for the politics of the people. I believe in a freer, united kingdom, and I hope you do too. That is why I'm asking you to reach out to those counterparts in the Conservatives and the Labours and the Lib Dems, even the Greens, or maybe even the odd SNP, in the emerging cross-party Leave campaign with a simple message that no matter what your politics, your ideas, your aspirations, as people saving our democracy from unelected bureaucrats and faceless global superpower corporations is a calling that everyone should answer. Tweet, post, blog, walk, run, speak, shout. Just get involved in the Leave campaign, because it's your Britain, it's your future, it's your time. It's now to leave the European Union or not. Thank you very much. Thank you.